Hey guys, it's Robin, RsIslandCrafts. Welcome to my craft room. Is everybody ready to do a little EPP, English paper piecing? In this episode, I am going to teach you how to make one of these little hexagons. I call them Hexies, and eventually we will be turning them into flowers. As I mentioned in the part 1 video, this time, normally I do a lot of scrappy Hexies, just whatever I happen to have laying around that's a 2.5, 3-inch square. But this time I thought I'd play with my red, white, and blue fabrics. Once you determine your color palette and which fabrics you're going to use, whether you want to go for red, white, and blue similar to mine, or maybe you want to do a Christmas one since, Christmas is coming up in another 12 months. I mean, you could get a few done before this Christmas, but I don't think you'll get a whole... So now that I've determined my color palette, and I'm going to do a red, white, and blue Hexie something, I'm going to at least make the flowers and hopefully turning it into a wall hanging or a table runner. I've gone ahead and I've gathered up all my red, white, and blue fabrics. Now since I'd already been planning this quilt for a while, I already have my squares cut. And I have them cut, it's a little over 2.5 inches. This one's 2 3/4. They're not all the exact same. I just make sure that they're more than 2.5 inches. Now if you remember, I am doing the 1-inch Hexies. Each side measures an inch, or they measure 2 inches from side to side. Now if my squares of scrap fabric are 2.5 inches, that'll give me a 1/4 inch past each point. So I like to make sure I have a generous amount of fabric around each side of the hexagon. Because sometimes if you're not careful and you just used a very, very bare minimum, you'll have an edge that doesn't quite cover everything, and your seam allowance is going to be extremely tight, which could cause it to fray and it could fall apart inside your quilt. If you're going to be spending all this time making this by hand, you want to make sure it's going to last. You want to make sure that your sides, that you have enough fabric around each piece to give yourself a decent amount of seam allowance. I also have some of my papers cut out. So after I have my fabric cut, I'll take my freezer paper. You can see that this is the shiny side on the back here, and I want the shiny side to be touching the fabric. When you heat up the freezer paper, this wax side on this side will cause it to adhere to your fabric. Now you can lay the fabric on here any which way you like, as long as you end up having enough room after the points and along each side to make your seam allowance. I find freezer paper adheres better if you iron it with no steam. Something about the steam and the heat and the moisture causes it to not stick very well. So my iron's not plugged in or anything, but you're just going to hold it on there for a couple seconds, maybe 5 seconds. Then I like to turn it over, and I like to heat it from the other side also. And what you end up with is your freezer paper stuck to your fabric. Now these have been on here for a while. Some of them are a little bit coming unstuck, and some of them are perfectly fine. If I need to, I can just go ahead and re-iron them, and then they'll stick again and it'll be perfectly fine. I've chosen this medium blue thread. When we come to the point where we're actually stitching the hexagons together, I'm going to be using this thread. To do the basting stitch on the back, I'm going to go ahead and use this really bright yellow thread. If you have a hard time threading your needle, go ahead and get one of those little needle threaders. They have those little metal ones with the wire that you can use, or they have the electronic ones or the automatic ones that do it for you. But I fold my thread in half, pinch it between my fingers, take the eye of the needle and line it up, and just slide it down in between. And if I'm lucky, I will thread my needle. Now you don't want to take a really, really long piece of thread because you'll end up getting tangled and it'll just be more stressful than the relaxing craft that you want it to be. So I take about an arm's length. I'm going to do the quilter's knot. Here's the point of my needle. Here's where it's threaded. I'm going to hold the tail that's not, it's at the end of the thread. Wrap it around 3 times. Then I'm going to hold the wraps, push the needle through, pull it through so that the eye is going through that knot. I'm right there. That gives you a nice small knot. If you feel that the knot is too small, another way to do it is you just hold it between your 2 fingers. I wrap it around my finger and I roll my thumb and finger back like this, away from each other, and it just forms a big knot. Now when we go to stitch our corners, our back over and we baste it, I'm going to just pull this over and leave this extra fabric there. If that extra fabric bothers you, you can always trim off this extra fabric. Just go ahead and give it a generous 1/4 inch. I try to go, I'm eyeballing it, but I would try to give it about a 1/2 inch, just so I know I make sure I have enough fabric. In my opinion, the only reason you would need to get rid of the extra fabric is if you're going to be hand quilting the quilt. If you're going to be doing a machine quilt, or you're going to do some big quilt stitches and you really don't worry about that extra fabric, then you can go ahead and leave it. I'm going to go ahead and leave mine. So what I'm going to do, I have my needle, just threaded, bright yellow fabric, so I have my threaded needle with my yellow thread, because we're considering it the waist thread, but I just wanted to make sure it was bright enough for you to see. I'm just going to pick any of the sides, and I'm just going to fold it over gently. I'm not going to pull real hard and drag it. I'm just going to make sure it's folded up next to that paper and give it a little crease. Then while holding it, I'm just going to go up to the next. I tend to go counterclockwise. I'm right-handed. I don't know if that matters, but whatever's comfortable for you. Eventually, we're going to tack all these corners down. So I'll fold the next corner down, just give it a little crease, and see where we have this flap over the where one side is folded over the other. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go into this fabric here. Now I want to make sure I'm only going through the fabric and not all the way through to the paper. So I'm going to stab that fabric. See, I'm not going through the paper. And then I'm going to bring it up through just past this fold line into the next section that we folded over, and pull it through. Now this corner is not secure, it's just kind of flapping, so I'm going to do it one more time. You don't need to do any extra knots, you don't need to be precise. I try to keep it about halfway from the edge of the fabric and the edge of the hexie. And that's it. First corner is done. Turn my hexie. I fold down my second corner. Give it a little gentle crease. And I'm going to do the same thing. My needle is very sharp, so sometimes it grabs the paper. So I just try to wiggle it. If you go through the paper, it's not going to be a crisis. You just might have to pick it out later. And that gives me the one stitch on the corner. That holds it just enough. Keeps it as a nice little pocket holding my paper in there. Pull down another corner. Go through it once. Go through it twice. Pull down the next corner. Make sure I'm not too close to the edge. I'm catching both pieces of fabric from both corners. This is the part that I really enjoy doing while not paying attention, while watching a movie, watching videos on YouTube, listening to music, riding in the car, if you're one of those people that commute on a train, this is a really good project. Just keep your thread a little bit short so you're not going off and stabbing the person next to you. And then here's my final corner. So just tuck this one down, and I just bring this one over and work it the same as any of the others. Now, because my Hexies might sit around for days, months, or years, I like to put a knot at the last corner I do. Before I pull the loop all the way through, I just stick my needle through it, and it gives it a simple little knot that holds it. Now, if you wanted to, you could continue on to go to this last corner, or you can just leave it there. Either way, it's held in pretty good. Then I snip my thread. And there you go. Your first Hexie's done. Now this is a little bit poofy still. Now I find when it's a little poofy, it makes it easier when you're stitching the next one together, because it keeps the fabric away from the freezer paper or the cardboard or the plastic or whatever it is you're using for your guide in the center here. You can go through and iron these, but like I said, I like that extra little room in the little pockets. Sometimes I iron them, sometimes I don't, but mostly they're going to sit in a stack, and just the weight of each other is going to compress them, and it's going to fold it down a little bit anyway. See, that wasn't very hard at all now, right? Like I said, you can go through and you can glue it, but this is just so much easier because when you have to remove the paper, it just pops out so simple. Because even though we ironed it, it really wasn't actually glued. It was just a temporary thing. Let's do it again. Tie a knot at the end of our thread. Now, I don't tend to wear a thimble for this one because it's really not a lot of pushing through too many layers of fabric, and I find I don't normally stab my finger that much. But if you find that you're stabbing your finger a lot, go ahead and use a thimble. Let's do this red one. Okay, so we have our hexagon shape. You start anywhere you want. Fold over the first corner. One of the hints I have is if I notice that, let's say maybe this corner is a little bit shorter on extra fabric on the side, maybe I might want to do this corner as my first corner. I don't know why it matters, but sometimes I feel like the last corner, when you're going around, sometimes the last corner gets the least amount of fabric. So sometimes I'll bring that down first to make sure I have a decent corner there. And just sew through. Let me get up a little bit closer for those that need a closer view. Spin it around to the next corner, fold it down, a little crease. Just folding it over and finger pressing it that little bit is usually enough to hold everything in place because of course it's being held in with your thread anyway. Like I said, I don't knot each corner because this is just basting thread and it's really serving no purpose except holding the fabric to the paper in the proper shape. But if you want to knot every corner and that makes you feel better, go for it. Sometimes, see when you pull this, it pulls the fabric out of shape, your hexie out of shape. So you don't want to stitch it so that it's like this because then you're going to have a shape like this. So when I notice that I'm starting to need to pull it, I'll put it between my ring finger and my pinky and just hold it so I can give my thread just a little bit of a tug, a gentle pull. And it keeps my hexie from flopping around. Go around to the next one. That little pinky ring finger trick just kind of stabilizes it a little bit. See, and this time, I could go like this and fold it down, but then I'm at a weird angle over there. So I'm going to stick with keeping this one out of the way and folding this down, and we'll worry about that when we get there. Because this way I can see the fold and I'm going at it from the right hand side. But once again, like I said, if you wanted to do it this way, you can just spin your hexagon like this and stitch it this way. It's just, I'm trying to be a little bit gentle on my hands and my wrist and not make myself go like this too much, because that's not good for your wrist. So we're just trying to hold everything gently. I'm not going like this when I'm holding it. It's just sitting gently in my hand, nice and relaxed. I find if I'm stress crafting and I'm holding everything too tight and I'm all struggling like this, then maybe it's time to just sit down and read a book. Because it's not going to be good for my project and it's not going to be good for my body. So my last corner, just go back through that loop. Oh, I don't think I'm going to get a knot that way. Let me go through it one more time. And boom. Now some people don't knot their basting thread at all. They leave both ends open, and you know that's fine. But like I said, mine tend to sit around a lot, and sometimes I like to go through them and look at them, so and choose out which ones I want. So I like mine to be a little more secure. Plus when you drop them on the ground, then there's no issue. So it's as easy as that to base a hexagon using freezer paper and the EPP, English paper piecing method. So what you're going to need to do for next week is you're going to need to go ahead and figure out which one, if you want to use the same color in all your centers, or if you're just going to be totally random, whether you want to use the same fabric all the way around, or once again, you're just going to have a mixture, whether scrappy or the same color. So you need to go ahead and get yourself 7 of these hexagon pieces, so that next time we get together, we can go ahead and sew them together and make a flower. If you have any questions, go ahead and please leave them down below in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, please go ahead and like it. And if you want to be notified when the next video pops up, please go ahead and subscribe and ring that little bell. And YouTube will let you know the next time we have a video up. Until next time, bye!